Evidence, though, I just have to say, I mean, we do have bank records, devices, laptops, travel records, changes in administration policy. Seems like pretty strong evidence to me. To the
this
dinners,
is not about,
you don't think that's involvement?
First of all, this is not about innuendo. It's not about what I believe. It's a question. Do you have evidence? If you had evidence that Joe Biden was linked to Hunter Biden's business deals in a way that is illegal, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You would probably have the votes for an impeachment inquiry, but you don't.
Oh, that's gonna hurt!
Can I get a slow zoom, please? Slower. Lower, right in on Beavis's face, right there.
But you don't. Because of people like Ken Buck.
As Republicans tried to play the Uno reverse impeachment card for a crime that they all seem to get excited about, but when asked what evidence they have, say things like this.
Is astounding. You would be shocked. You would blush, Caitlin, if you'd seen what I had seen.
You've said this before, and we spoke with you after you went to the Treasury Department and looked at those reports. But I mean, you, as a member of Congress, do have access to those reports. You went and saw them yourself. So I think a lot of people ask, you've been home for 6 weeks. There's been no new evidence that's been uncovered or brought forward. So what is the basis now for having?
Well, I think, there are more people to subpoena, whether that's Hunter Biden, whether that's the bookkeeper, whether that's getting Shokin in to testify. There are a lot of witnesses out there that saw things that were part of meetings that Joe Biden was a part of, that were part of the transactions, that were potentially part of the bribery scheme. I mean, all that evidence the American people should be able to have and see.
And your party, the Republican investigators, say that that's proof of influence peddling by Hunter and James. But that's just your suggestion. You don't actually have any facts to that point. You've got some circumstantial evidence. And the other thing is, of all those names, the one person who didn't profit is there's no evidence that Joe Biden did anything illegally.
But Matt Gaetz especially was amped up yesterday and ready to go into the lion's den of CNN after some unsubstantiated yelling on the House floor.
Now, moments ago, Speaker McCarthy endorsed an impeachment inquiry. This is a baby step following weeks of pressure from House conservatives to do more. We must move faster. Now, I will concede that the votes I have called for will likely fail: term limits, balanced budgets, maybe even impeachment. I am prepared for that eventuality, because at least if we take votes, the American people get to see who's fighting for them and who's willing to tolerate more corruption and business as usual.
Only to be left dumbfounded as CNN host Abby Phillip spelled out what every single anchor, journalist, and pundit should whenever they humor Republican talking heads at their own peril. If you had the evidence, you'd have the votes, but you don't.
Evidence, though, I just have to say, I mean, we do have bank records, devices, laptops, travel records, changes in administration policy. Seems like pretty strong evidence to me.
None of which links President Biden to.
Well, it was Joe Biden on the phone.
None of which.
He was calling into the meetings. Wait, Abby, are you actually trying to tell your viewers that you don't believe that Joe Biden was involved in Hunter Biden's business deals?
It's not
a
about
hard case.
It's not about what I believe. It's about whether there is evidence that President Biden is linked to the misdeeds that might be linked to Hunter Biden. That's the issue. But I want to get back.
I do want to. Come on. Wait, hold on. Can you just acknowledge that when he calls into the business deals that he's involved? When he calls into the dinners, you don't think that's involvement?
First of all, this is not about innuendo. It's not about what I believe. It's a question. Do you have evidence? If you had evidence that Joe Biden was linked to Hunter Biden's business deals in a way that is illegal, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You would probably have the votes for an impeachment inquiry, but you don't. Because of people like Ken Buck and people like Don Bacon and many others in your conference.
Well, I see the evidence differently. I think that that's why we need to have the votes and have the debates and have the hearings. And again, they represent their constituents just like I represent mine.
Even fellow Republicans are tired of this bottomless pit of nothingness. I mean, take Ken Buck of Colorado, who's been on quite the tour recently debunking his own party's agenda.
2 days ago, you said that the time for impeachment is when there's evidence linking President Biden to a high crime or misdemeanor. You said, quote, that doesn't exist right now. Do you still feel that way tonight?
I have not seen any evidence that links President Biden to Hunter Biden's activities at this point. I will be getting a briefing later in the week. I'm looking forward to understanding more of what the Oversight Committee has uncovered. But at this point, I have not seen that evidence.
Well, perhaps Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who you have been pretty vocal in pushing back on, is getting your message, because yesterday she posted, quote, this, quote, "Our country deserves for Congress to vote for an impeachment inquiry for very important reasons, not a rush impeachment vote." That is a bit of a shift in the timeline, a little bit of a pumping of the brakes on it. What did you make of that?
Well, Marjorie filed impeachment, articles of impeachment on President Biden before he was sworn into office more than 2.5 years ago. So the idea that she is now the expert on impeachment, or that she is someone who should set the timing on impeachment, is absurd. The time for impeachment is the time when there's evidence linking President Biden, if there's evidence linking President Biden to a high crime or misdemeanor. That doesn't exist right now, and it isn't really something that we can say, well, in February we're going to do this. It's based on the facts. You go where the facts take you.
But when you weave through the hot air, word salads, hearsay, nothing burgers, and whataboutism, as Fox News' voice of reason Jessica Tarlov did, she perfectly highlighted yesterday that they have nothing. Nada, zilch.
But as always, I am thoroughly entertained by Jesse's diatribe, and I learned some new things, but it's strange that members of the Republican Party who serve in Congress don't agree with him. So much so that they're on record saying things like this. David Joyce, Congressman, "I'm not seeing the facts or evidence." Dusty Johnson, "There's a constitutional and legal test that you have to meet with evidence, and I haven't seen it." Don Bacon, "There should be a direct link to the president and some of the evidence. I think we need to have more concrete evidence to go down that path." And then Ken Buck, "The time for impeachment is the time when there's evidence linking President Biden, and I don't think that evidence has been presented." Now, these are not people who are Democrats. They're not members of the lamestream media or whatever you want to call it. Those are Republican Congress people. Kevin McCarthy, I guess, has amnesia. He has short-term and long-term. Last Friday, he told Breitbart that there would be no impeachment inquiry without a vote. He also, in 2019, went after Nancy Pelosi, saying if she was going to have an impeachment inquiry without a vote, it would create a process completely devoid of any merit or legitimacy. Well, welcome to the circus, Kevin McCarthy. That's what you've done. Nancy Pelosi did have that vote on October 31st in 2019. McCarthy has made too many promises to too many lunatics. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I hear this, Politico's reporting this afternoon that Donald Trump was on the phone with Elise Stefanik, number 3 in the conference, the GOP conference chair, talking about impeachment. He continues to do Donald Trump's bidding. Now, I return to where I started. No one wants an impeachment inquiry. It's never fun. It's not going to help anything. But it is going to show that the GOP is a fiercely unserious party. They have to keep the government open. That should be the priority. You should, I don't know, have some plans to make life better for the American people. But no, you're going to spend the next several months, by the way, collecting evidence. You've been doing that for 9 months already. You just haven't come up with anything.
And here's the thing. If it wasn't just a political chess move, and they were, in fact, interested in the crime of someone using family ties to enrich themselves, may I introduce you to fast rising Democratic star Robert Garcia and a presentation I like to call "I Got 99 Problems and $2 billion from the Saudis."
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to urge House Republicans to investigate one of the modern American scandals and political cons. Now, why did the Saudi government give Jared Kushner $2 billion just months after he left the Trump White House? Kushner, who oversaw Middle East policy for his father-in-law, has enriched himself and his family in what is clearly an enormous grift and likely serious conflict of interest crimes. So let's review. First, Jared Kushner conned his way to a cushy White House job with no clear job description and no experience. Now, some colleagues from across the aisle have explicitly said the Kushner family has engaged in business dealings that may have crossed the ethical line, and I agree, yet they refuse to act. Is this the same party that's obsessed with President Biden's family?
We sit here, we hear our colleagues bring up certain things like, oh, the Biden family took money from a foreign entity, right? And it's just like, well, really? I mean, do they really not know that Jared Kushner took $2 billion from the Saudis? I mean, by the way, they go on Twitter and blame the Saudis for 9/11. But then Jared Kushner who, by the way, was not a wealth expert before he worked in the White House, nor was he a Middle East expert before he worked there, gets $2 billion from the Saudis, and they don't have any questions. And I just think that the American people recognize that they have no credibility. It's why the stuff they've been selling in this committee for 9 months has not translated, which is why they got to start it all over again. You don't have any credibility when you only want to look at one side of the coin.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.